Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I am your host, Mark Roberti, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Closet, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Now, if you are looking to take your business to the next breakthrough and you want to chat with me, you can schedule a strategy call with me, markroberti.com/strategy if you are interested. That will be in the show notes. But one of the things about business that is really important to acknowledge is the risk taking, because there's a lot of risk within business. And you could argue that being an entrepreneur is less risky than having a job, because with a job, you rely on one source of income, but the risk is there all the same. And the key to being a successful entrepreneur is to get comfortable with taking risks and doing it in a smart way too. So we'll be talking about that in this episode. Today's guest who joins us today, she is a speaker and coach who loves to empower women so they can take steps towards big dreams and a better life. She's a serial entrepreneur and big dreamer who took a hobby wedding planning business born out of a college dorm room and created a multi-business empire. Through her speaking, businesses, and passion project, the Females on Fire podcast, which will also be in the show notes, she creates content and resources to help women turn their what-ifs into tangible realities. Today's guest for episode 350 of the Breakthrough Success podcast is none other than Hayley Luckadoo. Hayley, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Hayley, I'm so happy to have you on Breakthrough Success. Looking forward to having this conversation about risk taking, because as business owners, we do take a lot of risk, but it is definitely one of the fun parts of the game. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit on how you got comfortable with risk taking and diving into these businesses, because it's something that a lot of people are really afraid of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out right after college, and through kind of a long story and a series of pretty unfortunate events, I just found myself at rock bottom, basically. And in my opinion, that's where the best businesses, the best ideas are always born. And I just kind of had to say, what now? And I got to this place where I was like, okay, I need something that I can do to make money while I figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I had been helping a lot of friends that were about to get married plan their weddings, and I was really good at it. And it was just this moment for me of, can I really turn this into a business? And is it really going to work? And I took that leap of faith and stepped out into that, and it took off beyond what I could have ever imagined, and ended up turning into a second business where I was helping other wedding professionals learn how to run their businesses. And that transitioned into just working with entrepreneurs in general. And now 6 years later, it's grown into a couple different businesses and a lot of coaching and a lot of speaking, and really helping other entrepreneurs understand how to really take those first steps and then how to continue to take those steps. And for me, it was just constantly having to say, okay, I'm going to step out into this big, scary thing because I can't not do that. And I feel like we get so stuck in saying, well, what if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if this happens? What if it doesn't work out the way I want it to? And for me, it was just so much more important for me to look at myself and say, well, why not me? And why not this? And why not right now? Because I would much rather have to say, well, what if I fail? Or what if it doesn't work? Than to get to the end of my life and say, well, what if I had just tried?
Right. Yeah, that really strong last point there. I mean, there are a lot of insights sprinkled there, but I mean, think about, at the end of life, do you want to live in regrets, or do you want to say, I tried this, it didn't work, but at least I know. So that's why risk taking is, you learn more about yourself, you open the door to more opportunities, but it is still risk taking. And I think risk taking, we understand why we do it, because we believe in this long-term vision that things are going to end out better. But I feel like a lot of people, they're stuck on the short term. They're stuck on, like for a business, they're stuck on, I put so much money into this thing and Just starting to see some momentum, but I mean, I put so much into this. So how can we just like get a little more focused on that long-term view, even when the short term is like right in front of us and it's the day to day, like we always see that, but the long term is a little further away. So wonder to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that you can do is, most people will say, stop looking at it as a risk. I think you should do the complete opposite. Realize that everything that you do in your life is a risk. If you have a 9 to 5, or you've got kids that you take to school or anything like that, you get out, you get in the car and you drive to work, or you drive the kids to school. That's a risk. Just getting in the car, there's other drivers on the road. You don't know what's going to happen in that time that you're trying to get somewhere. Every single thing that you do, from the time that your feet hit the floor in the morning until you go to bed at night, is a risk. You just don't think of it as a risk because you're comfortable with it. We're comfortable with driving. We're comfortable with what we eat, with what we do every day, with our morning routine. We're comfortable with those things, and we've been conditioned that those things are not risks because we're used to them. They're safe. They're okay. So if you'll start looking at everything in your life and realize, oh, everything that I do is a risk, and every single day some of those risks work out for me, then the risk to invest in something, to start a new business, to do whatever the big scary thing is, isn't really going to be so scary. It's just going to be another risk that you have to take. And you'll start to realize that you do that every single day, and it doesn't have to be scary. And it's just as simple as saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah, a really great point about the driving, because I feel like a lot of people, they think it's riskless when they get into their first crash or they witness a crash in front of them. That's when they say, oh, wow, like, it's a risk. Now, it's not as, there are certain things that feel more risky, like driving, obviously, like your life's at risk, but you don't really think about that too much, especially if you're driving the middle of the day and everyone else around you seems to be driving, safely. But it's something you don't think about. You just drive, you look around, you just don't think about it. But for business, I feel like it's constantly on our mind, and it's good a little bit because you want to be able to set bigger goals. You want to know where you're heading, but at the same time, if it's too much in our mind, it can really paralyze us. So I'm wondering, how do we strike that balance where, like, yes, we know what's going on, we know pros and cons and stuff like that, but just like driving, like, there's a risk, but you're just able to keep doing what you're doing comfortably.
Absolutely. And I think it's all about weighing your options. So, take the driving example. Okay, I've got to get to work. Am I going to walk there? No. It's going to take you forever. So for you, it's a better option to just get in the car, try to do it safely, get there as best you can, and not have to worry about it and not have to walk, right? It's just a better option to get in the car and drive. Same thing with business. Weigh your options. Is this really going to benefit my life? Is it going to make me more money? Is it going to make me happier? Is it going to give me more time to go do the other things that I want to do? If the answer to any or all of those questions is yes, then it's worth the risk. And it's just another little risk like driving. It doesn't have to be this big scary thing that we always build it up to be. I think we get to the point where things like driving, our morning routine, the things that we do every single day are just so comfortable to us, and we're not looking at them as a risk, and we're not afraid of them because they've become so comfortable. You mentioned getting in a car crash. You don't worry about getting in a car crash until you've been in a car crash.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're scared to get back in the car. You're like, what if it happens again? And that's the problem with taking a risk in business. We're afraid to fail. And it's because we're all humans. So we've all failed before and we don't want to do it again. So it's just like pretending that you already had a car crash because you've already had a failure, but you've got to get back in the car. You got to take another risk, because if you sit there and you just keep saying, well, what if this, what if this, what if this? It's like I said, your whole life's going to go by, and all of a sudden you're going to be saying, well, what if I had just tried it? What if I had just gotten back in the car? How much easier, how much better would my life have been?
And for someone who drive, like if you drive, and some people they're listening to this, they're in the cars right now. I mean, the idea of like, getting in a car crash and because of that, because in some cases it's not even your fault. You get in the car crash and you're like, oh, I'm never going to go in the car again. Like, that sounds silly, But that's exactly what people are doing with businesses. Like if they mess up a product launch, they give up on it. They think that a classic one, oversaturation. Like if your book doesn't do well, it's oversaturated. It's not your fault, and just don't do it again. Like that's the mentality that a lot of people have. But you got to get into that car again. We've been using that metaphor a lot, but it works.
Yeah.
You got to get into that car again. You just got to keep going, even if mistakes do happen, which they are certainly going to happen. And you mentioned failure, which is really important. Failure is part of the process, and you have to just get comfortable with the fact that you are going to fail at certain moments. So I'm wondering, how is that comfort built up for you over time? Because I know it's not something that we enjoy or anything like that.
Right. I think this is going to be the craziest answer, but I have failed so many times.
Mm.
And that's the only reason that I'm comfortable with it, because I've seen myself at rock bottom and known that I had nowhere else to go but up. And I've seen the things that I can overcome. So I know that anything that I do now, if I fail at it, it's not going to be a big deal, because look at everything I've gone through before. So I think you've just got to force yourself to take the risk, do whatever this scary thing is that you're worried about. And if it doesn't work out, just say, okay, was that for me? If it was for me, how can I do it differently? You know, if your product fails, if your book fails, if the business doesn't work out, whatever it is, why? What was the why for why it failed? How can you go in and try again differently? Try again a little harder, give a little more to it. It doesn't mean that it's not meant for you. It doesn't mean that it was a bad idea or a bad product or a bad book. It just means it didn't quite hit the mark this time.
Mm.
If you look at anybody who's successful in business or really anything, I mean, look at Olympic athletes. They train their entire lives. If you ask any Olympic athlete, you know, did you hop in the pool and would you have won a gold medal the very first time? Of course not. They probably took little swimming lessons as a kid, the same way we all did. And so anything that you do, any industry that you're in, you're going to fail. You're going to have to take those risks. And I think what scares us is that not only are we afraid to fail, but we're almost afraid to succeed,
Mm.
because I think deep down we all know that when we get that thing that we want, when we get to that place that we want to get to, we're going to have to step up and take another risk. It never stops. It's this vicious cycle of just constantly saying, okay, I'm going to do this thing that scares me. Okay, I'm going to step into this. I'm going to take a risk. And we know it's never going to end. And so if we never start that vicious cycle, we never have to go through it and keep being afraid of it. The reality is, if you don't step into that, you're just going to be sitting here saying, what if, your entire life? And
Right.
that's even scarier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you do have to definitely get into it. I mean, if you fail, like it's not a problem if you learn from it, if you continue. And one of the things I do want to touch on, I mean, though we've been talking about risk as the main focus and just getting more comfortable with that and realizing things like, you know, like driving in a car is risky also. So like, let's do some risk with business. But one of the things you've mentioned, I believe twice, is how you had a rock bottom moment and then that helped you grow. And I want to talk about just rock bottoms a little bit, because
Yeah.
I've heard other people who they've said like I've hit rock bottom and then my business takes off. And one of the things that I want to cover is that there are some people who they're listening and they don't feel like they're at rock bottom, and they feel like by going through with their business they're going to hit rock bottom at some point, or that you have to hit rock bottom to have motivation to really get these great results. So what's your advice for someone who is not at rock bottom and has not experienced the big kind of a rock bottom to just keep going and growing the business?
Yeah. So you don't have to hit rock bottom to have seen failure, right?
Right.
Failure knocks us back a few steps. It doesn't always knock you all the way to the floor, right? So for me, yeah, I started out at rock bottom. I built off of that. But everybody knows failure. If you think about the past couple years of your life, you know something that you haven't done well, or that you didn't follow through on, or you didn't do all the way. everybody knows what that feels like. Everybody can think of an instance where they have failed at something in their life. It doesn't necessarily mean that it knocked you back to rock bottom. So for me, yeah, I think about that rock bottom moment in the beginning, but I also think about all those little failures along the way that just set me back a few steps. It's like if somebody punches you in the face, right? It's
Right.
probably, unless it's some like really huge guy, it's probably not going to knock you to the floor, but it's going to hurt. It's going to like knock you back just a little bit. That's what failure's like. Failure's like a punch in the face. It doesn't necessarily knock you all the way to the floor. You're not down and out yet, but it kind of gives you this wake up call like, okay, I've got to step up. I've got to do something different. I've got to do this a little better. And just learning from those little failures and building off of those, that's how you build success. You don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to have some crazy, insane story of how your business got started and you never meant to get into business and all of these things that we hear all the time. You just have to be able to say, here's this little tiny failure that I overcame. Look at this thing that I did. And that, if you can build off of those, you'll find success. And you don't have to be afraid of those little tiny failures.
Yeah, that's a really great insight. I mean, rock bottom, like in its nature, has been like a really big failure that really feels like it set you back and you're just trying to recover from that. But any failure can be used to just understand that you want to get better at something and that you are able to take these different risks that are calculated, that are smart. We're not saying like do something you have no idea what you're doing and put all of your eggs in that one basket you don't know. We're saying be calculated with the risk, obviously, but also like you don't have to hit rock bottom. It can just be a failure, and you use that as your version of a rock bottom. It has different meanings for different people, but regardless of the different challenges and different struggles we all face, one of the things that will guide us, make or break us actually, are the habits we develop. So with that in mind, Hayley, I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the habits you would consider essential for your success.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, just being organized and mostly being organized with my time. I tell people constantly, my coaching clients and in speaking, just get your life together, whatever that looks like for you. If you're in business and you sit down at the beginning of the day and you say, what do I need to do today? You're doing it wrong, because you have got to sit down and already know going into that day, okay, these are the things that I have to accomplish today. And for me, I actually block all of my time. So I know what I'm doing from 11 to 12. I know what I'm doing from 12 to 1. And it doesn't matter if I don't get it done, I'm moving on to the next thing. And that's been super beneficial in my business, because if you're ever going to set goals and actually reach them, you've got to create a tangible plan for how you're going to get there and how you're going to reach that level. And if you're sitting around spending hours and hours and hours working on something and it's not getting done, odds are you've probably just been getting distracted for hours and hours and hours. How often do we start something and we end up getting a text or a call, or we hop on Instagram, or we do whatever, and all of a sudden you've wasted 15 minutes and you're like, oh, I got to get back to work. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh, why didn't I get anything done? It's because you weren't working. You're just following distractions. So for me, just that habit of blocking out time and really focusing in on, okay, here's 15 minutes that I'm going to allow myself to get on Instagram, to text a friend, to do whatever. But then for this hour, I am not going to do anything except this one thing that I'm focusing on. And that is 100% my best tip, is just to block your time, be consistent, allow yourself time to rest, allow yourself to do the fun things that you want to do. But when it's time for you to work on your business, give it to your business. Don't do anything else.
Yeah, and that's a really great strategy that Hayley follows, where she's being very clear on what she has to do throughout the day and moving on to the next thing. Because you get stuck on one thing, and then if your whole schedule's out of whack, that's when you get the let me check Instagram for 15 minutes, and then that turns into an hour. So really great habits for us, and I feel like you delivered just such great value in this episode. I know for people who want to learn more about you, Hayley has her podcast, which will be in the show notes. But what are some of the other ways we can learn more about you and just follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check out my website. It's just HayleyLuckadoo.net. And I'm super active on Instagram. I'm at Hayley Luckadoo. So follow me along over there.
Thank you so much for sharing all those places we can follow you and all of your great insights throughout our time together. It was such a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had such a great time.